Hello everyone, this is Anuj Paul and welcome to my channel Gyan with Anuj. I've started this series to share knowledge about basic computer skills, for example, applications like Microsoft Excel, Word, PowerPoint, so on. Um, this should help you learn about the specific functions in these applications and help you work better with them.
In this video, we will see how to use or make pivot tables and how that helps us to very easily summarize information and find answers with respect to a data set that we have. Now, I have this created this sample data set of individuals living in different cities and with different age range, and I also have the information of the gender of the individuals, right? So I have the sample data, and let's say I want to get some of the answers around this data. For example, what is the gender ratio, right? What is the ratio of male and female overall in this population, and also in each of the cities? Or I want to know what is the distribution of male population, the total male population here across the cities. So just a different cut of the same, or a distribution of female across the cities. Or I want to know what is the age range distribution of males and female in the overall population as well as in the cities. So now, how do we do that using pivot tables? Pivot table is a very handy tool. It will we will see how it can very easily provide us all these answers. So let's start by inserting a pivot table. So when we insert a pivot table, you go to insert menu and you have a pivot table option at the start. So you can click on that and it gives you a pivot table. Now, typically you can insert the pivot table right here in this sheet, like wherever your cursor is, it will insert there. Or you can choose to create a new sheet and insert there. Now, I typically first create a sheet and then I insert it there so that I can work with my data set separately and with the summarization separately. So let me do that. So I create a sheet. Let me call it summary info, and let me try to insert a pivot table in this cell. So I go to insert, I go to pivot table. So it opens pivot table dialog box, and the first thing it asks me is what is the data range that you want to summarize on, right? So the cursor is already here. As you might be familiar with Excel. So whenever we have to select a table range, you can go and to exact table range. So I will go to that sheet while the dialog box is open, and I will select the data range. Now, one thing to note here: when we work with pivot tables, the data range that you have must have a heading column, because pivot will try to summarize based on this heading, right? So my data set already has a heading, so I will select the overall data range including the heading. Don't exclude the heading, it's important, right? So I do that. As you see, automatically the range is copied here. I've already selected the cell where it needs to be added, so I don't need to do anything. I'll just press OK. So as you see, a new pivot table is added, but we don't see any data here, right? Because we have not told the pivot table how to summarize the data, and that's the next step. So when you have this pivot table inserted here, you can see in the right hand side the pivot table fields uh, are displayed. Now these are nothing but exactly the same columns that you had in your data set, so which I had here, right? So you see name, gender, age range, date of birth, city. There are two additional columns. I'll come to that later. But these are the so it will convert the columns into fields, because these are the fields with which you will be able to summarize. Now let's go back to our sheet and see what was the answer that we were trying to get. So first answer that we want is what is the gender ratio overall, right? Now gender ratio is obviously the ratio of the different genders that we have. In my sample data set, I have only two genders, male and female. So we'll see how to get the gender ratio. So I have to get the percentage of male and female in this sample, right? First we'll do for overall, then we'll do it by city as well. So since we want to summarize by the gender, the first thing that we want to do is select the gender. Now if you look at a pivot table, it has got four different you can say attributes, right? So you have a rows. So rows are which will get listed as rows, and then you have columns. So you can select the columns that you want to summarize. Typically when you summarize, it will always be at least a two-dimensional view, right? And this is an area where you have the values, right? These values are where is the actual summarization that happens. And then you have filters. So we'll not use filters right now, maybe I'll show it at the end. But let's start with the first field, which is the gender. So you can click on gender. If you click on the field here, it will automatically try to put it as a summarization field. So it will add it to the rows. So as you see, it has created the different rows based on the unique values in that field, right? So we have two unique fields. It works for us because that's what we wanted to summarize. So I can go with that. Or the other option is you click on the field and while you have pressed the mouse, you just drag it to the respective box, right? So we have the gender. Now what we want is, we want to summarize, right? So basically we want to first need the count, and based on that count we'll calculate the percentage. How do you get the count summarization? Typically when you look at your data set, you will have at least one column which would not have any missing field, because it's kind of the unique identifier, right? In our case it will be the name, right? And every individual will have a name, right? In this case obviously we have data in every column, but it's possible that, let's say, we don't have age for some of the people, or we don't have city for some of the people. So this columns, while it can be used for summarization, but we'll avoid that. We'll pick a column which is all the data, so that we get the right summarization. So we'll pick name. Now since we want to get the count, and we're not trying to summarize by name, right? We're trying to get the count. So we'll just put this column in the values box, and it will look at the data, and it will just use this column to count, right? It will not use it to summarize. So now we have the count. So it's that simple. So now you know that out of the total population sample of 26 individuals, 12 are female and 14 is male. That's it, right? Now, but we wanted the ratio. So we wanted the percentage of it, right? How do you do that? So you click on this field that is got added, the count field. You do a right click and you say show values as. So by default, it will just show the count, right? Obviously, there are other options, but right now we have selected count. As you see, we have selected count of name, right? So any alphabetical field, if you select, it will by default make it count. If you select a numerical field, then it will do sum, right? But let's not get into that for now. So we have this count, so it is showing count, but we wanted percentage. How do you do that? So you need to first identify what percentage you want. Now in this case obviously it's just one column and there's a total here, so we want percentage of this total. So there are two ways to do it. One, you can say percentage of grand total, but typically you should avoid that, because grand total, as you will see, as we add more dimensions to this summarization, grand total percentage is not typically what we use. Rather, let's be very specific what we want. Basically what we want is this column which is showing the individual values and then the sum. We want a percentage of that total of this column, right? So you do percentage of column total. So out of 26, 12 are female, so it gives 46.5%, and so you got the gender ratio overall. It's as simple as that, right? Cool. So you can also rename this column, by the way, right? You can, say gender ratio, right? So you can use this. Now let's try to answer the next question, which is gender ratio in each of the cities, right? Now we have overall. Now how do we get the gender ratio for each of the cities? Which means we need the summarization by city. Simple. Which means we'll have to use the city field. Let's try to put the city field as columns. Does it do the trick? So now you have all the values in the city field. It has already picked the unique values from there. So there were like 5 cities in the data set. And now it is giving the gender ratio of each city, and you also have the overall gender ratio which we identified before, right? So that's it. So the first question is fully answered. So we have gender ratio for every city. And how did it get it? Because we selected percentage of column total, right? So every column, whatever the total, it is showing the percentage. And then you have a column which is the sum of all this, which is the total value of this field. So it is doing a summation there. Cool. Great. Now let's try to answer the next question. What is the distribution of male and female population across the cities? So now we want to know, if there are total 14 male, how are they distributed across cities, right? Slightly different summarization. So let's not disturb this pivot table. We will add a new pivot table. So again, we can do insert pivot table, but since it's the same data set, there is another simple way to do it. Is you just click here, select this, copy, and you can do paste. So now I have the exact same pivot table here. Obviously it's copied all the summarization that I've done above, but now I can change this and it will not impact the first one, right? So that's the easy way to, when you have the same data set. Obviously if you had to work with a different data set, you have to do an insert pivot table and all of that. Okay, let's quickly now try to answer the next question. First, let's reset this so that we don't do any mistake, right? So you can remove the summarization. Count you can keep, or let's say we remove that as well. Okay, remove everything. So we start fresh. What is the distribution of male and female population across the cities? So which means city is key, we want to do a summarization by city. So let's select the city, right? And we want to look at the distribution of the gender, the male and female. So we added male and female here, and we use the name column to get the count. So it gave us the count. So as you see, it is now showing out of the total 12 female how they are distributed across cities, and out of 14 how they're distributed across the cities. But this is the count. So again, we want the percentage. So show values as percentage of column total, because that's the total female, right? We want a percentage of the total female. So it is clearly showing that female is distributed across the cities like this, the total female population, and the male population is like this, right? And it also shows the overall population distribution across the cities, which was not one of the things that we asked for, but it will automatically give you the total. Cool, right? So with few clicks, you got the answer to the second question. Now let's look at the third one. What is the age range distribution of male and female? First, let's do the overall, right? Now, age, typically when you do a distribution, obviously you'll do it by range, because individual age, it will be very difficult to have multiple people in the same age, right? So typically do by range. If the range is not given by default, right, you, so in my case it was not there, so I added a formula to convert this age into age range. Again, I will not get into the formula. I'll do a separate video on how to use formula and how what we can do with the formulas, but for now I've already have the age range, right? So since I have the age range here, I've just converted this into 4 age ranges, right, as you would see in the pivot table. So again, let's add a new pivot table. So I do a select, I do copy, and let me add it here this time. Okay, let me try to do this. Okay, cool. Now again, I will reset so that there is no confusion, right? And what was that we wanted? Age range distribution. So which means I need to do a age range distribution of male and female population, right? So let me do gender, and let me do age range. I'll put the name again, use that to get the count. So I have the count, right? So as you see, the overall female population, the distribution is shown as age, and male distribution is shown here, right? But this time I will not do column total, because I want the distribution of female. I don't want the distribution of 20 to 25 range, right? So what I will do is I will do percentage, show values as percentage of row total. So the total of total female, the count was in the row. This is the female row, and it is showing the distribution of female across this age range, right? So that answers the first part of the question, which is overall age range distribution of female and of male. Now we also want this for each of the cities. So I already have this for overall. How do we get this for cities? I will just add city as the second level summarization. So I'll do city. Cool, right? So you have for Bangalore, this is the distribution of females, right, in the different age range. So, and since I've added show values as percentage of row total, it is showing me percentages for the city, for Chennai, for Delhi, for Jaipur, and again same for male. And my original number is still there, right? The overall female population is also there. So both the answers are solved in this pivot table, right? So as you could see, we very easily use pivot table, and we could get this kind of summarization, and it's a very handy tool. You can do a lot of other things. Now quickly let me explain few more things. I'll do a separate video, maybe taking some scenarios to explain them in detail. But in the start of the video, I told you like there are 2 additional columns that got added. These are nothing but whenever you have a date column. So I had a date column, right? This is a date. So I had a date column in the data set. So it will automatically add years and quarters, right? So just to show you how this works, let me use this table, copy, remove everything. Though we will not do a summarization by date, but let's say we wanted to do a summarization by date. See, whenever I will click the date field, by default it will do a aggregation by the year and the quarter and the month. So in my data, I had for each individual, I had a date of birth, the exact date, right? This is 4/1/1990. This is 9/12/1997. What it did is, for every date field, it will try to create this extra aggregation. So now if you look at if I want, okay, let me first remove the percentage part of it, so that okay. So now, while we, because when you do a summarization by date, again, just like a numeric value, the age, specific dates are not useful for summarization, right? Typically you would like to summarize by the month or the year, right, or the quarter. So Excel does that automatically if it's a date field. So as soon as it's a date field, now I got a default aggregation of population who were born in 1985. So I could see that there are 1994 there are 3 people, 1996 there are 2 people, right? Is that cool, right? And if you want to, you can expand it and it will tell you in 1996, okay, quarter one there was 1 person and quarter three there was 1 person born. 1994 quarter two 2 person and quarter three. You go further, it will tell you the month as well. So it's that cool, right? So for date fields, this is a default aggregation it does, which is pretty cool. I find it whenever you have to do a summarization there. The other thing which I was talking, right, whenever we add a field in the values box, right, basically we want to get the actual count or sum, right? In all of these answers that we did today, we wanted to get the count and then the percentage, right? But there are scenarios where you would like to, for example, if it's a price field, right, you are looking at a item list and a price, you'd want to summarize the price by sum, right? So typically what will happen is, for any column you can do that, but obviously for alphabetical column there is no point of doing it sum, right? But if you been a, for example, age, though we'll never sum the age, but if you put age in here, it will automatically do a sum. So for every field that you add here, let me just show you, though I will it's not a practical use case, but just to highlight. So it has, if you see, it has sum the age by default. Whenever you select a numeric field, it will do a sum. But obviously you can go and you can do a value field setting. In the setting you can select what you want to do. You can even do an average. Many times we want to summarize and get the average of data, right? So it's very useful when you have to summarize by numeric fields, right? You can get the max, you can get the min. There are a lot of different you can do other, standard deviation and all of that, right? So it's pretty cool, right? That's how you do this. Let me fix this again. Sorry, by default it will take you there. Okay, right, cool. So that's pretty much what I wanted to cover in this video. That's how easy it is to use pivot tables, right? And it's a very handy tool to summarize data, right? Thank you so much for watching, and I'll keep sharing more such technical videos on very basics of Excel and other such tools. Thank you.